the benefits of, say, just for example, an HRV with a high quality filter on it to filter out wildfire smoke when we have wildfire smoke events, which are all too common now in Vancouver. If people only knew the kind of health value of that, everyone would want one, right? And it would be like a no-brainer to put that in all of our buildings.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand, and we're joined today by Zach. Zach, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
And we've also got Jay Fox back on with us today. How you doing, Jay?
I am great down here in Nashville.
Nashville, not too cold down there?
Not too cold today. It was very cold this morning, but we're up in the 50s. So that's pleasant. And that's Fahrenheit.
Yes.
50 Celsius would be
unpleasant.
Yeah. We're pushing 30 degrees in parts of New Zealand, and that's Celsius, and that's getting uncomfortable. And I'm not sure what it's like over the ditch in Australia at the moment, but it's turning out to be a pretty warm, record-breakingly warm summer, which is a little bit problematic. But let's get into this week's show, because we've got a really great interview with Brittany from RDH this week. Thank you to you, Jay. But before we get into that, Zach, we've got some people to thank.
Yes, indeed. A big thank you to our sponsors. Our founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Glavel, Ingui Architecture, Minitaire, Partel, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks too to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Gradient, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, and Source 2050. And a big thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
Very good. All right. How'd you come across Brittany, Jay?
Actually, this was part of a series that I spoke with Harriet Zoe and some other people at RDH about doing a series that really highlights women within construction, engineering, and architecture. And so she recommended reaching out to Brittany. We kind of went from there. This is Maureen Sanchez was part of that series as well.
Nice. And you do touch a little bit on that, or Brittany mentions it as part of the progress being made, but further needed in that area during this. So I really enjoyed this. So let's just jump straight in and have a listen to your chat with Brittany Coughlin from RDH.
I'm here with Brittany Coughlin, Principal Energy and Climate Specialist for RDH, and we're going to have a little conversation today about how she got into the Passive House community, what she does for RDH. Brittany, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
Absolutely. So just to start out, I guess I'm curious, what inspired you to pursue an education in understanding sustainable building systems? And do you have any specific stories maybe during the time of when you were just starting out where you had a professor or a mentor that really kind of changed the course of your career, really someone who inspired you?
Sure. Well, I went into engineering because I was good at math and science, I think as many of us do. My dad was also an engineer, which I'm sure influenced me as well. And then my first co-op term, I was really lucky to work for at the time, a small consulting company that was doing a lot of energy modeling. They were called Intermodal Engineering, but starting to get into lead. And I remember my like first or second day of work, the president of that company came, he had just gotten back from Greenbuild, and he had all of these different brochures and pamphlets. And he was like, there's this new thing called LEED. It was pretty new to Canada at the time, at least. This was before the Canadian Green Building Council had gotten going. And he was like, we're going to start doing it. Can you kind of organize these product brochures for me? And that kind of experience from that day and over the next few months, kind of working on sustainable related aspects of buildings, just got me really interested in green buildings and sustainability. And I was always kind of interested in the environment. And so that kind of tapped into a personal interest and passion of mine. And here I am today, I guess. So that kind of got me interested. I sought out other co-op terms in the buildings field, kind of gearing towards energy efficiency and sustainability. Did a master's in the field and decided I wanted to pursue a career in it.
Okay, cool. And was there, I mean, anybody in particular who stood out as somebody who was like, I guess maybe this is now early in your career once you've left university and kind of showed you the ropes a little bit and maybe got you more interested in sustainability and just kind of served again as a mentor type of figure.
I mean, I think really early on, my supervisor in grad school, Professor John Straub, was a key person who really had a good way of looking at the practical side of things. So he's always been really keen on sustainability and green buildings, but kind of sorting through what matters and what doesn't, and really critical thinking and kind of really seeking to understand buildings from a first principles standpoint to make sure that what we're doing is truly impacting buildings in a good way and is real sustainability and real performance. And I think that kind of mentorship has kind of underscored the way I look at buildings even to this day, of really trying to be practical and do things that really make a real measurable difference. So he was a key person to kind of instill that in me early on.
No, great. And so when you jumping from sustainability and LEED into Passive House, who kind of introduced you to Passive House, or was this just the industry in BC was going in that direction and you just kind of hopped on the wave?
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember the exact moment in time that I got interested. I remember kind of really early on going to like local industry events with the Passive House community. Monty Paulson was a key person in Vancouver that I got to know, who had a big impact on me. I remember we partnered with him on some kind of early research projects, and I learned a ton from him, and just his energy and enthusiasm for it was really foundational for me. And also just the kind of messaging around the kind of fundamentals or first principles around Passive House really resonated with me. Coming from an enclosure background, we had been doing work to really understand effective R values in buildings and look at how, we in energy modeling previously, we didn't always capture true enclosure performance because we weren't looking at it holistically. And so seeing the Passive House enclosure first, where they really looked at thermal bridging in detail, that really resonated with me, because that's what we had also been trying to push locally. So I just, together with the energy in Vancouver and just really feeling like they had the right philosophy that kind of jived with what we were already trying to do at RDH, just got me interested in it, and it's kind of grown from there.
Cool. And what was the actual first project that you worked on that was Passive House? Either let's say either Passive House inspired or Passive House certified.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There were a number of really early ones and a number of research type stuff. The kind of first one that stands out to me is like I've kind of taken it from start to finish is the Doig River Cultural Center, which is in northern British Columbia. Really challenging cold climate, like minus 27 or something Celsius design temperature. And what was cool about that is we were brought into it really early on, which is not always the case, right? But we had the opportunity to really look at massing and orientation and some of those like foundational things that you don't always get the chance to look at, and just trying to figure out, can we actually do Passive House for this really challenging climate and building type? And so that was one of the earliest ones that I, got to be involved right from the very beginning in deciding design strategies and modeling and that kind of thing. And now it's fully certified FIAS building, which is really cool to see.
That's really neat. Wow. Negative 27. It's really freaking
Yeah,
cold.
pretty cold.
Cool. So what I'm guessing that kind of introduced you to the importance of using kind of an integrated early planning method to really smooth over the process of integrating passive house principles. How have you taken those kind of elements that you learned in that experience, and how have you applied them to future projects? Like, what lessons did you learn then that you can share with someone who's maybe starting out and about to do their first passive project?
Yeah, I learned so much from that project that I've taken into other work. And you kind of said it, but the sort of early stage design decisions, so this building we were in early enough, and we had a site where we could do this, right? This isn't always possible, but we actually rotated the building 90 degrees from what they were originally thinking to take advantage of really good solar exposure, so we could have nice big south-facing windows. Have nice daylighting, nice views for the occupants, and take advantage of those passive solar gains, so that it didn't have to be, sometimes you see, in northern climates, really well insulated buildings that don't have a lot of windows. We really didn't want that to be the case. And so by rotating it, we could take advantage of that solar exposure. We also simplified the geometry a little bit. We kept the really critical architectural and cultural elements, but simplified a little bit of the articulation to kind of optimize things. We could look at where to kind of optimize insulation and detailing, and where it wasn't cost effective to do that. And so being able to do that really early on, I think, is kind of the key to doing passive house cost effectively and smoothly. Those are the sort of things that don't cost anything, and really set the project up for success in terms of passive house. You can really optimize things by having that early input. And like I said, every project you can't rotate it, right? That not always the case, but still just thinking about solar exposure and how you're laying out the windows and how you're doing the massing has such a huge impact on energy performance. But we have to be able to do that stuff early on before it gets set in stone and the design is moving on. So it was a good kind of learning process for me to really see that on a project that we did have that ability to make those kinds of changes. And we try to bring that. We tell all of our clients, start early, look at it holistically, and that's really going to set the project up for success in terms of being passive house.
Wow, that is a fantastic answer. More and more, I've been a part of the passive house community for about 4 years, and I feel like the biggest recipe for success is just early, getting everybody on the same page as early as possible, and constantly kind of never siloing, having everybody share a common vision and work together.
Totally. It's a team sport, right? Or it's a team initiative, and everyone needs to bring their perspectives and also be open to doing things a little bit differently. And then that's where you get to the best results.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, I guess moving on, I'm curious, since joining the workforce, have you noticed efforts within the AEC community to be more conscientious about efficiency and sustainability as a whole? This is not just passive house community, but kind of everybody. And have you noticed more of an effort on the part of companies to be more gender inclusive, which is a little slightly different question, but two industry questions.
No, I'll start with the sustainability one. There's definitely been a transition. I mean, I've been in this industry for over 15 years now, and I've definitely seen a shift from it. It used to be about energy efficiency, quote unquote, and now it's about carbon, right? And so that shift has really happened. So many more projects have high performance sustainability goals attached to them. It's almost rare to see a project that doesn't. And there's a lot more that are really targeting true high performance, whether it's passive house or net zero or something else. But we're on the upward part of that exponential growth curve, right? That stuff is really taking off. And kind of internally, in terms of companies, I think just about every company has hopefully some plans in-house to kind of decarbonize their operations. I think that's important too. So yeah, definitely that's been growing a lot in the industry. On gender inclusion, I would say yes, we've made a lot of progress, and we still have a long way to go. We still have so much more to do there. There are so many incredible women in our industry that is awesome to see. We have lots at RDH and lots at other companies, and we also need more. Right? There's still not enough. There's still lots of biases out there. There's still, areas and circles where we, face situations that aren't comfortable or aren't inclusive, and so I think that we need to be really active in trying to continue to take down those barriers and create a more inclusive area, inclusive companies and organizations and that kind of thing. And I think every company has a role to play in that. So yeah, lots of work to do still.
Indeed. And I'm curious, just because I guess I didn't ask this beforehand, but I know you're based in BC, but do you tend to travel at all, either to other provinces, or are you coming to the US at all, or maybe even to Europe?
I do, yeah. I actually work pretty commonly with our Toronto office, so I'm kind of there and back pretty regularly. I'm going next week to Toronto, so my workload is split pretty well between Vancouver and Toronto, as well as Boston. I've been doing a lot of work with our Boston team to help support their local. We've got an amazing Passive House team there locally, but just to kind of help bring some of the experiences that we've had in Canada to kind of support them on it too. So actually, my work is really split between Vancouver, Toronto, and Boston right now, I'd say, which is a lot of fun. And we're starting to see that grow in other areas where RDH has offices as well. We've got some really exciting stuff happening in Denver and on the West Coast too. So it's it's really taking off, and I love supporting our teams in different parts of North America. It's really fun.
Very cool. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you are now also at BCIT, that's British Columbia Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
Where you teach a whole building energy modeling. Can you describe what that experience has been like, and if there are any changes you would like to see to the curriculum that you would think would make students a little bit better prepared to actually work in the industry?
Yeah, it's been fun. I haven't actually been teaching too much lately. I've just not as much time in my days these days anymore. But I started working with BCIT to initially, this was actually pre-COVID. They were very forward thinking, but they wanted to bring their energy modeling course into an online version. And so I helped them adapt the course that they currently offered into an online offering. And at the time, it was a little bit tricky because they were used to offering this course where the instructor would kind of walk around and look at screens to help people learn energy modeling, right? And so doing that in an online environment just took some adapting to, which we now know through COVID is quite possible and doable, but that was kind of my initial involvement. So I worked with them to adapt that, and then I've taught it a handful of times, which is a lot of fun. You learn so much by teaching content and getting to interact with different students. I really enjoy that. I wish I had more time for it still, but I think that's a great to have those kinds of offerings for professionals. I think that we can continue to adapt them with the industry's changing so quickly, right? There's evolving technologies, and high performance design is getting better and better. And so continuing to update our course for those kinds of things. We did talk about Passive House in the course, as well as other kinds of high performance design, but sort of continuing to update the courses given new technologies is always really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with BC just being at the forefront of kind of decarbonization of the building stock, at least for North America. I mean, when I got into this about 2019, and BC was just like the poster child of what you're supposed to do. That said, I'm wondering if you think if their model could be kind of what's the word I want to use? Exported, there we go, to other provinces in Canada or states in the US. What advice would you give? Sorry to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
What advice would you give to any governing bodies in charge of such change, and how you could implement them successfully?
Yeah, and it already is starting to be exported. Toronto has Toronto Green Standards. So in BC, we have the STEP code, which kind of transitioned us from a code standpoint to performance targets, which Passive House does really well at. So it's kind of a similar model there. Toronto has a similar approach with Toronto Green Standard. I think we'll probably see that in our national codes in Canada pretty soon. In Massachusetts, it's doing that with the stretch code there. I had this really cool professional experience for me. I was, this was probably a couple of years ago, just before Massachusetts was introducing their stretch code, but I was in town to do some work with our Boston office. And so they'd set up a few meetings with me with some of the folks there. And I was reading up on the kind of background and the research they had done to support the stretch code there. And it was like identical. It was very similar to what we had done in BC with the step code. And so I got to this meeting and I sat down and I said, oh, it's awesome to see what you're doing. It's really similar to what we did in British Columbia. And they said, oh yeah, we copied you. and that was just such a cool moment for me just to see I mean, obviously they did their own work and there's differences as well, right? It's specific, but just to see how ideas can, someone can take it and build off of it to make it better and adapt it to their local context was really cool and was a pretty cool professional moment for me just to be like, wow, this is amazing that, these ideas are spreading and high performance is spreading within the codes. So all to say, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's lots more jurisdictions that are looking at that, but it can totally spread. In terms of advice, I'd say, I think that something that BC has done pretty well is really providing a lot of industry supports to bring the local industry along. So BC produced a number of guideline documents with different documents geared towards different parts of the industry. So like a one for design professionals and one for contractors and big buildings and small buildings and that kind of thing. They did lots of training sessions, again, specific training sessions geared towards different parts of the industry. And I think those things are super important to support kind of a smoother transition to implementing code. Because if we just put a code out or a standard out and no one knows how to build it, we're not actually going to get the results that we're planning, right? It goes back to that practical side. It's just not going to happen, or it's going to take a lot of time. So really putting a lot of effort into bringing the industry along, training them, giving them case studies, bringing them up to speed, I think is pretty important for jurisdictions that are looking at implementing that sort of code.
Nice. That's fantastic advice. And I'm curious, what do you think is like kind of the next frontier for building science and for decarbonization? I'm assuming it's materials science and kind of embodied carbon, but
yeah.
Is there any specific facet within that kind of broad range of things that you're looking into?
I mean, I think that's definitely the big one, embodied carbon. I think that it's still early days. We still need to learn a lot on how we model and calculate embodied carbon. It's really hard to do it with any level of accuracy. There's so many differences between materials and transportation and that kind of thing. And so we've seen projects where results are sort of all over the map, just depending on different modeling approaches and assumptions and that kind of thing. So I think the industry has a lot to learn in terms of how we model that, and then actually, reducing embodied carbon emissions. There's some really tricky, concrete. How do we deal with that? Mass timber is a good solution, more costly, but has a big impact. So I think that's the next big one that we still have a lot to learn on and a lot to tackle as an industry, and making sure that not to glance over the operational carbon side. I think we have a really good sense of what the solutions are, but we need to be doing it in way more buildings than we currently are. So making sure we're scaling that too is important.
Couldn't agree more. How do you think public awareness and advocacy can drive positive change in addressing the climate crisis within the building science or passive house space?
Oh, I think it has a huge role to play. I mean, so much of what we see and design on buildings is driven by consumer demand, right? And so if consumers are asking for low carbon, if they're asking for more comfortable spaces, they're asking for healthier indoor air quality, that's a big lever to help us actually be able to do it and design it into our buildings. I always think that if people knew, the benefits of, say, just for example, an HRV with a high quality filter on it to filter out wildfire smoke when we have wildfire smoke events, which are all too common now in Vancouver, if people only knew the kind of health value of that, everyone would want one, right? And it would be like a no-brainer to put that in all of our buildings. I've heard from our friends in California that air tightness is now driven by, needing to keep out wildfire smoke. And well, that's, again, that a great driver, one of many reasons to do it. But having that kind of awareness and consumer demand, I think, is super important. So definitely we need to keep educating the general public and help people understand the value so that they're asking for it. And then that helps us get it into buildings.
Yeah, I think, and Mike Ingui of the Accelerator is always fond of saying that, people don't even know that they can ask for these things. They don't know that it's available.
Totally.
And then once they, because I feel like the sustainability question is always framed in the kind of this idea of sacrifice. And if you're doing something that's good for the environment or even ethical and ecologically sound, you must be sacrificing something. And Passive House shows that it's actually the total opposite.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, another example is windows. Like, think of all of the luxury condos in Vancouver and our cities around the world that have like really poor performance windows that are super cold in the winter. Like so many people would pay for a really comfortable triple glazed low conductivity frame window if they knew that they could get that. So there's huge value there.
And actually, to play on the point, there was a very wealthy person I knew in Brooklyn who lived by a highway. And he got a Passive House, retrofit, didn't even know it was Passive House, just knew it was good, and was amazed by how quiet it was. And that was, sustainability was great, whatever. But like he cared about the fact that he could sleep now because, he kept getting woken up by the highway. So
yeah, exactly. You've got to tell the world this, this quality that they can have.
All right. So I guess just to finish up here with one last question. I'd like to know if you could give any piece of advice to the fresh out of school version of yourself, given the experiences you have now. What do you think that would be?
Oh, that's a good question. It's the hardest question, right? Because my career has led me to where I am, and I'm really happy with it. And you kind of learn a lot along the way. I think, I think if anything, maybe just keep doing what you're doing. I think we always need to give ourselves more confidence, give ourselves the kind of leeway to ask lots of questions and learn about different things in different areas. But that's maybe not the most exciting answer, but it's just always a learning process, right? And just keep learning, which I'm still trying to do.
I couldn't agree more. So. Brittany, just thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the podcast with us and speak and share your experiences. It's just absolutely invaluable.
And that was Brittany Coughlin from RDH. She's one of the principal energy and sustainability specialists there, and has obviously got vast amount of experience, which is great to hear about. Jay, what was the highlights for you from your chat?
Well, I think one of the very cool things about talking with Brittany was that she's gone kind of full circle from obviously a student like all of us at one point, but now she's teaching BCIT, or at least was involved in developing that program, taking it online. One of the big takeaways that I really appreciated was how she thinks that the industry needs to be kind of brought along. You can't do this as a top-down approach as government, saying essentially, these are the metrics we want you to hit. You need to do these. We're going to change the code and just, kind of follow along. I like the idea of bringing them on board and really giving them case studies and treating this as a partnership rather than, these are just edicts from on high. So I think that was a really important takeaway.
Yeah, nice. We've talked a lot about the importance of bringing the rest of the industry along, as well as just the people who are fully into it and wanting to dive down to the details. But spreading the message out and getting other people on board, I think, is definitely really, really important. One of the things that I noted right at the start was a bit of a name drop there with John Straub. I like how Brittany just mentioned, it was just one of my professors. And anyone who sort of knows about building science, John Straub's a bit of bit of a rock star in that world. And you know, I can't think, but you know, you can't have not been influenced by having a professor like that in guiding your career path.
Right, and he was a mainstay at Building Science Corporation for a long time, and now he's at RDH.
Yeah.
So there's it's pretty cool that there's that, you know, continued connection there with him.
Yeah.
Also great to hear Monty Paulson's name as well.
Yeah,
you know,
that was the other name drop.
yeah. And of course he's near and dear to our hearts at the Accelerator. He was so instrumental in getting the Global Passive House Happy Hour going and our whole kind of online community. So
yeah. Really interesting perspective on the transition from sustainability, which we often hear about, you know, people getting involved with LEED, and in their case, pretty early days in that, and how sustainability has transitioned from, you know, all about energy efficiency, but now it's really big focus on carbon. And there's a lot more going on. We're talking about it all the time, both operational carbon, but also embodied carbon and upfront carbon, people thinking about product materials and where things are coming from. And that is really the next evolution of the whole field of sustainable design. It's almost like energy efficiency is just a starting point now. It's like a given. But now you really need to be diving into thinking about the embodied carbon, and also that where the state of that industry is at the moment. There are challenges which Brittany acknowledged around the accuracy and consistency of the calculations involved with embodied carbon calculations. And I think that's something that we're definitely grappling with at the moment. There are some people that are then, you know, the next step is to have some consistent methodology and confidence in the calculations so that we can actually start bringing those numbers down. But the real challenge that we have right now is getting consistency with and trust in the numbers to really understand what the embodied carbon is and of materials, because it can be complex. So good to see that there's some smart people like Brittany and the rest of the team at RDH starting to really think about that.
Yeah, the one of the cool recent developments that's been happening in the embodied carbon space is something called ECHO, ECHO, which stands for Embodied Carbon Harmonization and Optimization. So it's a collaborative effort among a bunch of sustainable building organizations, including Architecture 2030, Building Transparency, Carbon Leadership Forum, ILFI, USGBC, and they're all working together overall to reduce embodied carbon, but specifically to harmonize the way that we report embodied carbon and kind of what make sure that we're using the same definitions and scopes of the impacts that we include and those sorts of things. So I think Brittany alluded to the fact that we're in these early days, and it is rapidly developing, and it's cool to see efforts like that. And Stacy Smedley, who is with Building Transparency, is going to be sharing more information about the ECHO project at the Reimagine Buildings 24 event in March, which we'll talk about, I know, in a little bit. But really important work happening in that area.
Awesome. Anything else from you, Jay?
Oh, I did like the story about when she went to Boston, and she's getting prepared to go and speak before people, and she's like, well, this, what they're proposing here, this kind of looks similar to BC, and they're like, oh yeah, we totally copied it from you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, then I'm pretty familiar with it. Like, that's fun, and I think that's inspiring too. It shows like if you create good policy, and you can get people to copy it, and so some of this work doesn't have to be redone.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of copying and instead of reinventing the wheel, and that transition from the step code in BC. Now you've got the Toronto Green Standard and now the Massachusetts stretch code, and there are others as well that have very similar frameworks. I think is really positive, and it doesn't make sense to just keep recreating and having to reinvent stuff that's already shown to work from a policy perspective as well as a technical and performance perspective. So yeah, all strength to that, and I hope some of that flows eventually through to wider codes and things like the ASHRAE standard. Awesome. That was great. Thank you for that, Jay. And going back to the intention of that and highlighting some of the amazing women doing amazing work. And for some time, Brittany's got a great career already, and over 10 years of experience with RDH alone, and I feel like she's got a huge amount more to give, and also inspire other, particularly women, into the industry as well, which is fantastic. All right, Zach, you mentioned Reimagine.
Yes, indeed. And actually, and maybe as a segue, I was also really happy to hear her speak about the Doig River Cultural Center, which is that one of her maybe first projects. The Passive House projects is a certified FIAS building. So that is it's a beautiful project. We can share a presentation about it in show notes that was done a couple of years ago on the Passive House Accelerator. The Doig River Cultural Center is the cultural center for the Doig River Band. So this is a First Nations community, and one of the things that's really exciting to see in Canada is this. The First Nations leadership in Passive House adoption and in Passive House buildings, which is one of the things that we're looking forward to sharing at Reimagine Buildings 24. So there's my segue. And I know that folks who are listening to the podcast have heard our sizzle reel that because we've shown it on previous episodes, but we have some news to share now about how the programming is shaping up that I just wanted to share. We're very excited about all this. This is again this Around the World 24 Hours global online conference that we're presenting on March 7th and 8th. And it's meant to celebrate this global movement that's transforming buildings so they become solutions to climate change. They slow and ultimately help halt climate change and make us more resilient to its impacts. So it's a combination, and we understand it's a combination of embodied carbon and energy efficiency, electrifying, clean energy, all those things. So at the event, we're going to be unveiling a new exemplary project every hour. And so these will include projects like a low embodied carbon passive house building that was featured at COP27 in Scotland, a straw passive house premium house in Australia that could be thought of as a vegan architecture, right? Plant-based architecture. That's a term that came up in the Accelerator Live yesterday from one of the participants. An exemplary living building. So it's not just passive house. So also a well building in the UK. A zero energy off-grid modular passive house cube that's designed for the Spanish military and is being installed in Antarctica at Spain's research center or station there. Chris Magwood's Zero House project, which is a project that's been constructed and deconstructed 3 times. So we're going to be looking at circularity. A net zero house in South Africa that draws on local vernacular architecture. Regenerative retrofit of an iconic SOM office building in Brussels. So all sorts of exemplary buildings from across North America. We just found out that we were getting significant underwriting from NYSERDA, which we're very, very pleased about, and also excited to be sharing buildings of excellence that NYSERDA has been supporting in New York. So all sorts of cool opportunities to connect with peers. This is like the biggest thing we've ever done at the Accelerator. And so, and I guess the other thing is, it is 24 hours, but you can take in live whatever is convenient for you to take in during your time zone, and you'll be eligible for AIA credits for what you've taken in live. And then you can just access, other stuff that's, in the middle of the night. asynchronously later. So there's not an expectation to stay up 24 hours. I will be staying up 24 hours. I know a lot of folks on the team will. Anyway, we just hope that you'll join us on March 7th and 8th for Reimagine Buildings 24.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, definitely check that out. You can find out more on the Passive House Accelerator website, and also don't forget the Reimagine YouTube channel as well. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jay. Always good to have you on the show.
Absolutely.
Great to have you, Jay.
Hope to come back a little bit more.
Yes,
Yeah,
please
definitely.
do. Please do. But we'll be back again next week on the Passive House podcast.